You're pretty clear about the very beginning of your sobriety wasn't a secret, but it was much more private. And I wanted to know, like, what was there a turning point? Because we'll get into the personal, but was there a turning point to make you actually come out and to really get vocal and get loud about it in such a positive way?
Yeah, that's actually really great. I've thought about this a little bit. I think initially, just it was really just the embarrassment of it initially. I mean, honestly, although I was pretty solid, I don't know if I was as solid as I am now. Like, I'm learning how to walk in this identity of just not being a drinker. Like, it's not a thing to me. I don't care if other people drink. I'm not like anti-alcohol, But at first, I think it was two-part. I think there's part of you that, even though it felt pretty solid, you just kind of wonder, is this really me now? Am I going to go back or whatever? And then the other part is just embarrassment. I mean, that's what kept me drinking for so long. Although I will say that it was only about an 11-month period of the 9 years that I was actually trying to stop, but I hadn't admitted to myself that I was an alcoholic. And so once I finally admitted that, that's whenever like the switch happened. It was at that moment, almost exactly. And then you process, like, especially as a dad, as a Christian, as a business owner, like it felt kind of dirty. It felt like I was letting people down, and in some senses I was, like, I wasn't living up to me. I wasn't doing my I wasn't reaching towards my full potential.
That makes sense. I saw a video of your wife kind of telling the journey a little bit. One thing that's fascinating about you is that you're a bit of a serial entrepreneur. At the same time, both you and your wife, in doing it really, really well as a team. But specifically with one of the videos, you chose, and it seemed deliberate, to keep yourself in frame, right? Like superimpose your image in the corner. And kind of two questions I really wanted to ask about that is, number one, when she's describing this, it's never easy as a man to hear, especially publicly, which is that's a different level, right? Kind of the inner feelings and the realities. Now, I'm more than positive this is not the first time you've heard some of this stuff from your wife, but while you're recording this live and you superimpose yourself, what's going through your mind as she's kind of describing those 5 years or so where she really wanted to kick it into gear?
I think, well, I mean, like, we have talked about this quite a bit, and I will say that there are moments when, especially when I'm reacting to someone's, reach, like, when someone reaches out to me with, a problem, and it seems like they just aren't quite ready yet. It's really frustrating now, knowing, having been there. And so in those moments, sharing my frustration with, just in private conversation with me and her, she'll kind of remind me that I was there. And in those moments, I sort of feel like that's an element of kind of keeping me at this place that I used to be. And so we work through that. I mean, her intention is never to hurt me or to have a grudge, or, but it just come it my there's still some sensitivity in some places. However, publicly, or just in general conversation, I- one of the things I've realized in this journey is, like, I talked to a lady not too long ago who's just going through her second or third divorce, and one of the main causes, I guess you could say, is an issue with alcohol. Her previous husbands just have chosen that world, right? And so this was actually a coaching call that I was on, and I was signing up for something, and she just laid this out, she had just gone through something, right? And when she was done just sharing her heart, and she was, trying to, not tear up, I just I, it clicked with me that this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, is so that women don't have to go through this, right? Not that I can, control it all, but I seemingly have some sort of impact. And so my wife sharing her side of it, her version of it, from her point of view, I think is so much more helpful than any. embarrassment or whatever that I might have, we really work well. We work better as a team, and that's always been something that's kind of set us apart from most couples. It's always been sort of odd to interact with other couples because we don't have a his and her bank account, his and her hobbies, his and like we do everything together, and our kids do everything with us as well. So we even debated on her being on here. I'm at a point where I want to really hone this skill of just kind of talking about these things by myself. But she's like, at arm's reach if I need her. But yeah, so I think it's the importance of her sharing that message that other women can relate to. Everybody's story or level of bad, is going to be different, but that the low that we came to was probably as low as we could handle, and so that's why, when the change happened. And so her point of view is huge in this story, and she was a big part. If I could share with other people, or if she could share with other people the way that she handled it, because we've talked about this too, like, we've was there anything else she could have done? Should she have asked or questioned it more, or put me on the spot more, confronted me more? And I think no, I think she handled it as perfect as possible, because it really comes down to what I know now is it doesn't matter. Like, I didn't do this for her. I didn't do this for my job, my house, my kids. I mean, there was elements of that I thought about, obviously, but it had to be a choice that I made, that I had to come to. And that's the hard spot. So I think learning, helping women understand that it could be a short process. It could be, I mean, some women deal with this forever, and it never, gets better. But harping on them, and as a wife out there sharing the Fit Over 40 Dad page with your husband, that's not going to help, right? That's just going to cause tension and resentment. And so I think just meeting your spouses where they're at, as and I may work on this a little bit more, like fine tuning that thought, but she did it about as good as it could be. So.
When I was watching the video, I actually sent that to my wife, which I don't use social media a lot as a consumer, right? It's much more business driven and in the back end side of things. But something about that video specifically, had me send it to her. Now, our story, obviously, there's nuances to everything, is quite a bit different, but I've never said it publicly. But I would say about 2 months ago, you've mentioned your faith, but you haven't gone into it hyper depth, and I plan to ask about it. But maybe it sounds weird to some people, but last year did 75 hard. Halfway through, decided I'm doing live hard. I'm doing all three. So I'm about to finish phase 3 now for the live hard, and that year reunion is in 8 days. But at the end of phase 2, I finished it. I got a nice bottle of wine. I enjoy wine. My family is Sicilian. And first glass, it sounds weird. It is what it is. But I just had a whisper in my ear and a whisper in my head. And I just felt God touch me and to just say, hey, maybe there's a season later, and it just gave me a milestone, like, put this down. And literally, again, first glass, poured the bottle out, right? Now, I've never struggled with alcoholism or even being a functional alcoholic, but I absolutely have enjoyed wine. I have absolutely had to show some self-awareness in that moment of like, is this really that hard? Is it that? Like, because if it is, wait a minute. Is this a crutch? Is it becoming a crutch, right? Why did I feel that first day after finishing phase 2 to go get a nice bottle? Like, why not date? Like, why is it becoming part of my routine, right? So in terms of Fit Over 40 and the work you do with guys, do you find something similar in terms of, you talk a lot about triggers, right? So those triggers and those habits, and showing the self-awareness to address them, or at least recognize them so that you can address them. Do you see common triggers with people that you work with that anybody, for whatever reason, might be able to pay attention to in the future and just go, oh, maybe that is me, kind of the way I did about a month or two ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, the big obvious, trigger or cue is like environment and friends, right? I've never really been kind of, in the cool crowd, I guess. Wasn't me in school, and we've always done, having a lot of kids and sort of living the farming lifestyle for a long, long time. And, there was a period of my life where I was even like people in our area confused us as being an Amish family, like, which was always comical to us. If you really knew, like we knew Amish, we did business with them in some seasons, but, uh, so the alcohol really put me in this, category of what I thought it meant to be a man and to be cool, right? And so my over the period of time, especially when I stopped traveling for work, stopped doing the contract work, and we just were able to rely on our business. I, I got into some friend groups that was just strictly revolved around drinking, you know, kind of nonsense talk, just typical guy, just bantering, whatever, just which is not me at all. I could only do it when I was drinking. And I mean, I could probably do it now, but like, why? Like talking about nothing is just not, yeah, in that moment, in that season, it felt like, in fact, these are the conversations that I would have with my wife, because she was always talking about business and growing things and the kids' futures and our future and all this stuff. And I'm like, I just want to talk about nothing. I would say that quite a bit. I didn't know what that meant, but I didn't want to have to think. And so it was easy to be in that environment with certain friend groups. And so friends were a big trigger for me. And that kind of just worked itself out. I didn't go announce. I mean, people knew that I wasn't drinking, my friends, because I wasn't drinking. Like it was obvious, especially at the volume I was doing it, to go from that to nothing. Uh, and so that kind of just worked itself out, and I don't really have that trigger anymore. But the other triggers for me, I don't really know what specific. I think just time of day was a big trigger. So, the common theme that I see with other men is probably there's this assumption that whenever we're stressed, that somehow alcohol relieves us of that stress. And there's a moment, there's a period of time, depending on your level of drinking, where that could very well be true, seemingly, but there's so many other negatives that compound, right? Especially over years of drinking, that you end up, it ends up being counterproductive. And so my big question now is like, so maybe you don't have a problem, but what is the value? Like, is it bringing you any value at all? Is there any positives to it? I kind of talk about my my drink of choice now when I have a drink is a Dr. Pepper. And it, ironically, sodas, high fructose corn syrup, things like that were one of my biggest argument against, like, the church. Before I drank, I was like, why do they harp on alcohol? But yeah, there's all these people with diabetes and all this. And I was really big. And actually, you mentioned Sicily. I actually spent some time there. And one of the things I noticed when I came back was people were like seemingly healthy. And I was like, what's going on here? And I came back, this was 15 years ago or more. And one of my buddies was like, they don't, one of my buddies from Australia, he's like, they don't deal with the same packaged stuff and high fructose corn syrup. Like, it's daily trips to the market, and things like that. So I would harp on this, why don't we, talk about sodas and diet and stuff? And anyway, it's just, I think, we all, we have this assumption that this drug of choice, which is what it is actually helping us, and we use it in stressful situations. And the triggers are, yeah, environment. Like, what do you do when you first walk in the door? And so something very specific that I did was my average normal drinking time, although it would be earlier on the weekends, was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I was very deliberately made that my workout time, which I prefer to work out in the afternoon anyway. So that was my, like, direct one for one swap. And I've just continued that. It's just convenient for my day. It's a little break in the monotony of my day sometimes. So, um, I think those are the biggest triggers that I've noticed: friends and environment. You know.
Hmm. It's funny how over time, friends maybe sometimes it's a drifting, right? That you kind of it doesn't have to be a catastrophe, a calamity. It doesn't have to be a crazy falling out, but you just kind of notice, like, oh, I don't really see that person around anymore. It must have been the glue that gelled us together, right? Well, that's actually one thing later on that I was gonna ask is, I mean, now it's a little more public with like the Grant Cardones, but in a lot of the research and worldwide that I've lived, um, it's always fascinating to me because oftentimes alcoholics or addicts will replace a vice with a different vice, or like, like I said, it's now a little more public when Grant said, like, I traded my addictions to a work addiction, right? And one thing I wanted to ask is, did you find any other vices? Because let's be honest, there's a difference between being fit over the age of 40, right, and doing push-ups with a rucksack, right, on the Iron Cross rings, okay? There's a level of intensity there that is very deliberate, that is very intentional, right? So did you kind of trade those? You said you traded that deliberately on the time clock as like this is my time to work out, to replace that bad habit, but that level of intensity doesn't come just like naturally, like overnight. That's a very deliberate thing, right? Did you trade one for the other, would you say?
Uh, Consciously, I don't think so. I think there's probably elements of it that appear that way, but I think what was really going on in my mind is I felt like I missed, like I had started trying to do muscle ups and things like that, like 6 years prior. And that was the big transition where alcohol really just started winning the game. And I just kind of gave up on all that. Like, I'm like, I can't do this. And I look back at pictures now and I'm like, oh, well, I mean, I definitely wasn't in any kind of, I was probably in a better shape that I had been, but I wasn't in any kind of good shape at all. And I wasn't putting in the work. I would just put in little things here and there, hoping that it would just happen. Right. And I realized that if I want to do some of these, and there's things that I won't do just because of body limitations. I'm not going to be stupid, but there are things that I've wanted to do for a long time, and I'm always up for a good challenge. I watch Frank Madrano and people like that, and he's always doing something weird, and so I'll try it. And but I don't know that I intentionally went went as hardcore with the fitness because that's what I was doing with the alcohol. I just think I realized that if I want to reach some of these goals, which I had kind of lost a little time on, then I have to put in the work. And honestly, I work out maybe 45 minutes to an hour um, a day, some sort of movement, and a lot of that time is setting up the tripod and the camera and getting the angle just right. Like I probably have 30 minutes of actual work, but my body's able to uh, grow a lot fat. Just being optimally with my hormones and being optimal with my diet and my, it's not 100%, but I'm much more. I can make much more progress now. Um, but I do, I think, I'm listening to Be Obsessed or Be Average right now. Grant Cardone. I've watched him, listened to him for 15 years now, and I think that mindset is important just for a lot of things that we do, especially running a business. Like, you can't just like do an 8-hour day running a business. Like it can be overwhelming. And I thought that I was using alcohol to kind of ease that pain, but it just made it worse because it made it more of the weight I was adding. I talk about, not adding to the weight that we have as dads. And alcohol definitely, like, it is that big rucksack right on your back. And then you have all the stuff that you're supposed to have as a dad. And so once you remove that, like, you're actually able to hold these things better. And so yeah, like, I just like pushing myself and seeing what my limitations are. And some limitations are just I haven't put in the work, and some limitations are just I don't really want to get injured at this point. I'm not going to do the ego stuff. But yeah, it's kind of cool doing some of these things. It kind of it kind of helps, not that I necessarily need it so much anymore, but just based on my history and my personality, it does help with or has helped with my confidence. You know, I don't think a lot of the things I do are really that amazing. Like flipping a tire really isn't that amazing to me anymore. But I do realize that there are a lot of men, because they haven't put in the work or the intention of reaching their full potentials or reaching towards it, that there's a lot of men that can't do it. A lot of men can't do a push-up. A lot of men can't do a pull-up. And but what I know from my experience is that, like in January of 2023, when I first started this journey, it took me 11 months to actually get sober, but I was getting back in the fitness world. I couldn't do one pull-up. Like I had not without a band, without a resistance band. So it happens pretty fast, relatively speaking. Um, so, I mean, there has to be an intensity for sure, but I don't know that it was a direct, you know, but that's Grant. I mean, that's how Grant talks. He's just he likes to stir the pot, which I really like. So not everyone can handle it, but I do like it.
So it sounds to me like, okay, so there's two things here that I think are significantly more important, and we could brush past them, but I'd rather not. So one thing that I do every day, and it's just something that I've been doing for quite a bit, is I read 5 pages of Think and Grow Rich every day before I start working. And that is significantly harder than it sounds to do when you have fires to put out. It is what it is. But what I didn't expect from doing that is that it's forced me to slow down and really notice nuances that I didn't expect I would notice. Even after the fifth time you read it, whatever, it's like, whoa, I didn't even realize that. One thing I realized this time around was, and again, this is like 15 minutes. This isn't crazy. It's 5 pages and it's very short and intentional in that way. It's not trying to, but one of the things that caught me off guard was when Napoleon Hill talks about the reasons for failure, the most common reasons for failure. He says very deliberately that the most common, as a matter of fact, right? In his perspective, as a matter of fact, the most common reason for failure is choosing of the wrong spouse, right? And you alluded to this a little bit, and it sounds to me, right, that you chose correctly, that you and your wife just really gel together. The other element that that I alluded to but didn't bring in here was, it sounds like you made a decision. Like it was like an instantaneous decision. And then, yes, there was 11 months and there was probably triggers in certain moments that are harder than others, but it doesn't sound like you had this journey of relapse that you hear other people in this, like, I tried and then I failed and I tried, and the fifth time I finally, had an energy shift of some kind. But it sounded like, you just were like, decision, done. Hey, it is what it is. This is my new life now. Walk me through that thought process. For some reason, in this phase of life, I'm obsessed with this idea of the power of a decision and how to activate that. And what's the difference between, a decision that sticks and one that doesn't. For you, walk me through that, because it was just a choice.
Yeah, and this subject can really ruffle feathers, but my wife and I are very matter of fact, and that's just kind of how we've always been, very frank and matter of fact. Not to the point of just trying to hurt people, but like we don't really allow for a lot of excuses with our kids, with us. The pursuit of growing our businesses. We tend to hold on even longer sometimes than we should, because we're like, maybe we didn't try that or whatever, because we just don't like excuses. And so I think that we, especially in America, and having had the privilege of traveling to other countries, I've seen other cultures, and so there's, especially in the Italian culture, from what I've noticed, although they're kind of, uh, I don't know if emotional is the right, but just very
Passionate.
passionate people,
We'll
right?
go with that word.
But they're also very matter of fact. Like, this is, you just buy the bread. You don't think about it. You just kind of, this is what you do every day. You don't think about the frustration of having to go to the market every morning, or whatever the thing is, or not having some of the luxuries that we have here in America. And so I think that what we find here is that people tend to camp out on these things. And I know there's realities to, subjects like PTSD and subjects like losing a loved one, and depression can be a real thing in the right or wrong environment, however you want to word that. But I think, everyone, well, a lot of people like to say, well, you don't know my situation, right? And so, and although there's truth in that, no one knows anybody's situation, and we all have different levels of what we're able to handle and take on. And so, yeah, maybe my sobriety story, for example, I just had this conversation with somebody who I didn't qualify for his podcast because my story wasn't bad enough. And that's fine. Like I probably wouldn't reach his audience because his audience is at a different mental place. I get it. However, the things that we've gone through in life, the things that what I'm coming to understand now is my walk as being married for 28 years, being the dad of 11 children, four grandchildren now, for a parent for 26 years, starting very young from nothing, no roots before us, no foundation, no anything. Um, you learn a lot, and so there's a lot of life lessons that I'm realizing, or that's what I've been applying to this sobriety thing, or that kind of was the switch. And so once I admitted to myself that I was an alcoholic, I couldn't do this by myself, and that I wasn't any different than any other man. That was my big thing, was I'm different. I can handle it. I can, I function better. I'm more laid back. I'm more fun. The reality is that, alcohol may have exposed that in me, but it was already there. So now it was time to walk in those places that I thought alcohol was making me better at, just as me, right? And I mean, I've heard musicians talk about this, artists talk about this. I don't fully know how to say the definition of what an imposter syndrome is, but the idea is that you can't really fully accept the value that you can bring, is kind of how I understand, a part of it. And so people think that alcohol is what was making them perform better or do this. But the truth is it's already in you. That the talent, the work, the whatever you put in is already there. And so, yeah, I don't know, we tend to camp out on excuses so often. And I think that there's realities we need to face, situations, part of our situations we can change, some things we can't. And I'm the first one to want to go to a reason why I can't do something. And my wife is the last one. And, but it's generally how we operate out loud, is we're the last ones as a couple, as a one group. And so, so I don't like it. I mean, excuses aren't benefit. There's no value. Again, it's like, what's the value in this excuse? I mean, let's acknowledge the reality. Can we change anything about it? Great, do it. If we can't, then then you have to adapt, or just give up now. Like, I don't understand. I mean, I'm not in for people taking their lives at all. Like, I don't. I wouldn't. I would never support that, and would never want to present that as an idea or an option for anybody, especially if they feel like they're at a weak spot. But I do wonder. I'm like, if you just want to camp out in this place, like, why do you even show up? Why do you exist at all? There's your level of greatness is going to be different than mine or yours. Um, but if you just want to camp out on all these excuses, and I get guys that do this, they just want to unload all their stuff, and I'm like, so why did you reach out? Just because you want to tell someone else about your problems? Like, okay, we've acknowledged it. Now what are we going to do? You know? It kind of has to be, we guys in war, I haven't experienced that, and the traumatic stuff that have happened. But or childhood trauma, I've had family members that have dealt with that, and that's harsh, and it does stuff that you have to process through. But it shouldn't keep us at this place of like, now this is our identity, right? And that's easier said than done. I totally get it, and our life experiences will determine how we understand that. But the truth is the truth, no matter what situation it's in. And I think, because we, especially in America, like I said, want to have these titles, like, I'm ADHD, or I'm PTSD, or I'm an alcoholic, or I'm poor, or I'm, like you name all these different titles we put on ourselves. Uh, I've seen too many people, and I've experienced overcoming things myself that I didn't think were possible. And I've seen too many people do the same, do the impossible, and it all starts with just choosing to do it, and you figure out the obstacles, instead of camping out. Well, instead of camping out on the weak part.
So that's what I was actually going to ask here is it sounds like, to quote Tony Robbins here, awaken the giant within. What I'm wondering here as you're describing this is, did you always, even when you were 146 pounds, 6 foot, all those years ago, was there always this whisper inside of you that there's more? Or let me explain why I asked this. I should say that is I was sitting and I was having dinner with somebody who's not crazy poor. He's a contractor, very smart guy. He's got money. He's not riding around, with billions and millions, and he's not one of these cats, but he's doing well. And I actually asked him at one point, and this is the first time this has ever happened to me in my life, and it happened to me multiple times since then, but I just casually asked him one day while eating a hamburger, preface, in a burger restaurant I later bought and sold, which is why I had to do 75 hard, because I got fat, and it's really easy when you keep that environment around you and you're there from 3 a.m. to 3 p.m, literally sleeping on the bench. This is like a real story, right? But I sat with this guy, and there was a point to that, and I asked him, like, do you feel like you're gonna do something, that you have to do something, that you have something big inside of you? And I'll never forget the moment, because he had to think about it. That alone, if somebody asks me, I don't have to think about it. Now, I don't want to show the hubris to be like, I'm the next Elon or Steve Jobs. But at the same time, I don't have to think about it. It's like, I know there's more inside of me. I know I have impact. I know I have something to do. And then after that, this is like 7 years ago, 6 years ago, it happened to me multiple times later. And then I had this realization, not everybody actually has that little giant within them, that they're just waiting to make a decision or turn that switch. And it was this realization because I thought everyone did. And that's kind of why I'm asking you, in terms of when you made this decision, was this lingering for years that you just knew, hey, you could do better, you're not living, or was it just like radical transformation?
It's funny. We talk about this a lot in my family. Actually, this personality stuff which is the root of this, in my opinion. We use the Enneagram. That's kind of the one that we choose to go to, and so my wife's really big into it. So my personality, like, I would be the guy that had to think about it. I just would, like, there was no. But my wife, like, I mean, she would probably say it before you got the question out, like, she's super passionate and thinking about the future and thinking about all these big things all the time. And so I've always felt, well, in the past I'd felt a little inferior to that. And however, I will say that before I started drinking, so up until about from 20 years, 19 years old, that's when I got married, to 38. So for that almost 20-year period, um, I was always very driven in, like, the work I did. I was the guy that people talked about. I was leaving my stamp at every job. Like, people knew my work. Um, I was, sought after in the industry, I guess you should say, you could say, but but I still had limitations on myself, things that I just thought I was always going to be the skinny guy, and that's just what it was. And I struggle with that quite a bit. I don't think people understand when you're at that level of skinniness, that, although I've never been fat, I when someone harps on your weight, no matter if it's too much or too little, there's elements of it that you think you can't do anything about, and so it can be painful with the wrong mindset. And so I just, my personality was so I would lean on my abilities. I'm like, even though I'm the small guy or skinny guy or whatever, I can outwork anyone, was kind of the mindset that I had. But I had really no, although I had started a couple businesses, on my own, landscaping, lawn care, whatever, and the farming stuff, I never really had a lot of drive. I never really had a lot of vision. I have a lot more of that now, although it was definitely, the 9 years of drinking definitely just kind of completely covered that up. Like, I didn't have any of that, but now it's working itself out a little bit more clearly. I still have a hard time thinking a lot about the future because, like, even when I first started working out, like, there's not a lot of before videos or pictures because I didn't really know what I was going to be accomplishing or doing. I just knew that I wanted to get better at. I didn't want to have trouble walking up the stairs in our house at 45 years old or 46. Like, it was, things were just starting to click in my brain. I'm like, I'd read I think I had been exposed to that Dr. Peter at he talks about, like, aging and stuff a lot. I don't remember what his,
Peter
yeah,
Attia.
talks about aging a lot. And it just got me to think, like, all these little practical things you can do to kind of determine where you're going to be when you're 80. And I'm like, I've already got 4 grandkids. Like, I need to get a handle on this because, for even though I felt kind of, out of shape and weak in a lot of areas, I I wasn't, I'd been thinking about, what, living for longer periods of time, and it was kind of scaring me. So, I think I got off track there a little bit, but yeah, I'm not that. I would have been the guy in the hamburger shop that had to think about it for a second, and that's just, and what I understand with personalities. Like, I don't know if you're even familiar with that Enneagram or whatever, but I probably have an assumption of what you are, what little knowledge I know, but my wife and I complement each other for sure, in our personalities, but she is definitely the driven one. So. Yeah, I wasn't chomping at the bit to. I didn't know what I could accomplish. I knew what I could do, like, in making things and a job, but I didn't know. I had no real experience in fitness. I had no real experience in anything like that. So I just kind of thought this is just how I was, and so somehow I needed to figure out how to accept it, so to speak. So.
Yeah, it sounds like even in your journey of going public, getting on social media, right? Fit over 40. You mentioned something where you said, I had no idea how I was going to do this. I didn't know anything about this world at all. But guess what? I showed up every day, right? And it is totally coincidence. I did not plan it, but the book there is Grit. It just happens to be the book I'm reading now, given to me by a mentor. And the reason why I asked that question is, are you familiar with the Flynn effect? So the Flynn effect is this weird phenomenon where they've noticed that IQs have risen dramatically over the last like 40 to 50 years. And there's a lot of empirical reasons for that. Her argument in the book, by the way, I'm not that smart. I literally had read this a couple days ago and it just fit perfectly, by the way. So that's like the only reason. It's phenomenal. And she talks about the same thing where grit naturally, like the Flynn effect, increases with age. And like I said, there's a difference between, hey, I want to be sober, I want to get in shape, and taking it to a level of intensity that takes intention. And that's kind of why I was asking that, because it's very fitting. I know it's coincidence, but it's very fitting because you seemed instantly like a person with grit, right? And when you share that you threw yourself into your work and you were the hardest working guy, like that makes a lot of sense to me. So one thing I did want to ask though is, you've talked about it a little bit, but you have 11 children, and you mentioned 4 grandkids. That's a lot.
Yeah.
I think you know that.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So was that like when you and your wife originally got together, did you guys talk about wanting a big family naturally? I just had my first son, he's like 18 months old now. So we're kind of in that phase where do we want, 4 or 5, like what's the number? And you guys chose 11. Was that like a discussion?
Yeah, it was a discussion, not at that down at that number, but it was a discussion. My wife came into the equation with the desire to have 5 kids, just based on friends of her family growing up. The mom of that family her best friend's mom, she really looked up to her, and they had 5 kids, and so that was just the number in her head. I was never around kids, never thought I was going to get married, never thought about it ever. So I didn't even understand what it meant to have to have kids at all, and so we just started having. In fact, I was overseas when my wife got off of whatever kind of, I think she had some kind of birth control thing or whatever. This was probably a year into our marriage, and she told me that she wanted to try it. So I'm like, okay, whatever, you know. And so it really there was not intention on my part of having kids at all. There was an intention on our part of having this many. However, I will say that at child number two, and things really started to change after our first birth. I mean, not to go heavy into birth stories, that's kind of my wife's department, but we had a very traditional hospital birth. I was in the military, so it was free, and I, I remember it being a little weird. Like, I just felt like I didn't have any control. I didn't know that you could have control over the situation. We were very uneducated. My wife, so she kind of dove head first. She was already in nursing school, which she's never really completed. She ended up doing some other stuff, but so we got connected with some people and just got into that world and realized that we that's just another area of responsibility that we have, right? And so I think so we had our second one at home. It was a home birth, and then the next 9 I delivered at home without a midwife. Like, it's so we quickly got intentional about just the idea of a family and children, and I got on board with that pretty fast. However, around 6 or 7 kids, I was like, okay, I think we're done. I think I'm done. Like, I don't think I'm capable of giving what I thought each child might need. But our convictions were that we couldn't do anything to, like, we didn't feel like deciding how many kids was in our control, because there's a lot of people, right, that want to have all kinds of kids and can't. There's a lot of, so it's not like we just decided to have 11 and that's what we got. Like, there's a lot of, you know God allowed us to do that. Like, we it's not something we just were willing, I guess. So that's about the extent of the intention of it. I kind of fought it for having more kids, especially at my work, being gone, traveling a lot. For the first 4 or 5 kids, we actually traveled together. So it was, although it was tight in travel trailers and apartments, and it was a little weird, it kind of worked for us because it kind of kept us close as a family, which was really cool. But yeah, didn't have an exact number picked out. We ended up meeting a family during as soon as I got out of the military that had 12 kids, and that was my first exposure to a large family, a family that was not just doing everything the world's way. Like, these teenage kids that would come downstairs and, like, introduce themselves and shake their hand, shake my hand, and just they were helpful around the house and around the farm that they lived on, and just the dynamics of the family just were really intriguing to me. And so we literally moved in with them to soak in everything that we could about learning this, this, whatever this thing was, this life. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty proud. I don't like to talk about like, when I meet people, I try to not, I try to let that conversation, uh, you know, kind of be in the back burner as long as possible, because it tends to overtake the conversation, because not many people have in our world, we know a lot of large families, so it's not a weird thing to us, but it's not the normal. You don't see it just in normal. And so I tend to not talk about it right away. My wife loves talking about it right away. Like, because that's just, like, but that being said, I'm super proud of it. Like, I know that it's something that not many men, especially, are even willing to entertain. Um, and it's always kind of set me apart, and kind of in my mind helped me understand that I don't know, maybe it's a pride thing, but I feel like I'm doing something pretty great, and I have the opportunity to really affect our, at the very minimum, our community. like just like my kids are going out to the workplace and stuff like that. And so again, back to the alcohol thing, that's what was so pivotal for my low point was I was realizing that I was going the opposite direction of where we had started. The direction we had started with the large family takes a lot of intention. You can't just, it doesn't just happen, especially, to have continued results of your kids being a blessing to everyone around that you meet in every environment, every church you went to, every store you go into. Like, we're never disruptive, we're always helpful. And and I was just kind of letting that ride itself out. And so I was taking a U-turn and going the opposite direction. So that was a big part of why I stopped drinking. But I mean, not why I stopped drinking, but it was a big part of helping me understand that I was needed to make a change. So
Did it? So the part of the reason why I ask is like, did it? One thing I've heard you talk about is, on multiple occasions of setting a good example, right? Did it kind of shine a mirror towards yourself? If that makes any sense. Like, I'm already starting to see, like, look, I'm Sicilian, my wife is Japanese. You don't get different in culture, okay? Like, it doesn't happen in the whole world. And I'm already starting to see quite a lot of myself in him, right? In many ways. And it's kind of showing me, whether I want it to or not, a little bit of a mirror and a little bit of forgiveness on my dad's part, right? That we talked about that passion earlier, right? A little bit of, oh, there's some understanding, right? I wanted to ask about, the role of family in your journey of sobriety and in the seasons of life. Was like, how important was that for you? Because I'm picking up, you don't really talk about your faith very often, but it's sounds to me like you're pretty strong in your faith, and I married a woman that wanted to be a traditional missionary her entire life, right? So am I. I'm fairly, I call myself a missionary in business, and I know every business says that. This is literally what I say in interviews. Like, every business owner says that. Every business says that. I know that most of them are lying. I'm not. I'm very, very serious about that. So it sounds to me like family and faith and community is quite a large part of this, even before sobriety, just in your journey. Am I
no,
right
yeah,
with that?
100%. Yeah, my story isn't that, I was living my life and we were doing good things. I started drinking, stopped drinking because I found God. That's not like, I already, my faith, began when I was, in my mid-teens. And then I just, I mean, I guess some people would say I was lukewarm for a lot of years or whatever. But, when we got married, my wife had just become a Christian. Interesting testimony that she had. God very deliberately spoke to her, and then I came into the picture. We that's kind of part of her story. It's kind of fun to hear sometimes, but I was kind of like her new friend, because all her old friends she had to get rid of. But so yeah, we've always been really intentional about our faith, and we've been on many journeys of doctrines, and been in some weird stuff. And then you kind of regroup, and you kind of feel like the church lets you down or man lets you down. And just you're trying to figure all this stuff out. And but it was always the it, our heart was always to find the truth. And we were always seeking that out. And so we're a lot slower now just to jump on board with some new idea or new thought. But there was a period of time where probably I was a little bit quicker, just because I didn't really have much of a. I mean, I went to church, non-denominational church, by actually a pretty famous pastor, is the guy that baptized me, Tommy Nelson. And but that was the extent of it. Like, I've never really felt, like, I've got a 19-year-old right now that is just kind of starting his real faith journey, and it's incredible to watch him. He's kind of a quiet personality, sort of like me, but he's very bold in a very graceful manner, and just soaking up everything he can right now. And it's so cool to watch. But he's not letting that limit his ability to actually produce in the marketplace. So that's really cool too. Like, he's got a lot going on. But yeah, it was very foundational it had to be foundational in my sobriety, because I that's the part of realizing that I wasn't capable of controlling this, and I had just intentionally proven that to myself, well, unintentionally proven that to myself over the previous 11 months, that I wasn't capable. There's no tricks I can do. There was no amount of marathons I could run or hard things I could put on myself to get me to stop drinking. So I needed to really rely on what God was willing and ready to do in me. And so that's about the extent of I say extent, I mean it's a big part of the transition, of course, but that's about the extent of how loud it was or visible it was. The other thing is, the part about the message I was sending to my kids. Yeah, the previous 2 or 3 years, when we moved to our current location, we went from a really small house, like 1,200 square feet on 4 acres, really small, with pretty much all 11 kids living at home at the time, to this place. It's much bigger. We have 30 acres, and I kind of felt like I had arrived, right? And so alcohol became even more of a part. We were making decent money, more money than I'd ever made. And so I just kind of semi-retired in my mind. And part of that was a lot of these. We love entertaining and having people over and cooking, and alcohol was a big part of that. Not drunken fest, but just alcohol always was a part of it. And that was the message I was sending my kids. And so as they started, asking to have a beer or asking to have a couple beers, or we were having conversations about drinking and driving, just conversations that honestly I believe now, in the right environment, maybe should happen, but shouldn't be like, they shouldn't be topics that you always have to talk about and work through. Like I don't have to have conversations about drinking and driving with my kids now, because they're not drinking anymore. Like they may have a beer here and there or whatever, like with a buddy, but even then they're realizing, like, why do it? Like I never feel good afterwards, and I can have just as much fun anyway. So I was sending a very mixed message about how a dad uses alcohol to escape. They were obviously seeing that. They didn't know the extent of my problem. I think I masked that really well, and I think that's a key part of my story, and how there's so many men out there that can mask it really well and actually can have fairly successful businesses. I think they would be more successful. Fairly successful marriages, although it would be better. Fairly successful parenting, even, although it could be much better. Um, and maybe even have a handle on their fitness, to an extent, if they so choose. But there's really no value being brought. So yeah, the message was very confusing, and I just became aware of that. It was a very confusing message.
So it sounds like naturally it's trickled down to
Yeah,
them that
yeah.
you had mentioned. They're like, what's the point? That makes a lot of sense.
Almost immediately, this one kid, son in particular, my 19-year-old, he was my frame, 6'1", 140 pounds or whatever, like pretty thin. And he immediately, uh, like he put on 20 pounds in the last six, just of muscle, just being intentional with his eating, not drinking anymore. But yeah, I mean, it definitely trickled down pretty quick, actually. So. Yeah, and not just him, all of my children.
I got an aunt. My great aunt is 105 years old. When she came to visit, this is like she was like 95 at the time. This is a while before Okinawa. First thing she asked, she got late at night. We had dinner ready. First thing she asked for, where's the wine? Now, I grew up on a horse farm, so we're 30 minutes to the store, okay? We literally let the food cool down to get the wine for her. She's now 105. She was featured on Smucker's, the jam, right, for the 100-year. Like, it's real, right? And I'm here in Okinawa, which is a longevity island, and the blue zones might not be real, but longevity in Okinawa and the health. And you mentioned multiple things here, which is kind of why I asked about your faith in general is, I've said this thing all around the world. I've literally never heard a pastor ever, even once, and I've only met one Christian in my life that I've ever asked, have you ever heard a sermon on gluttony as the main topic, not a point, but the main topic of gluttony, which is not a suggestion. It is a command for us to do. And I've only had one Christian around the entire world say yes. right? It's just not talked about. So you had talked about the sodas, right? And you've just mentioned multiple things here. Were you praying during those 11 months? Like multiple, you had mentioned multiple at times, kind of hinted at that faith, right? Were you praying? Was it seeking assistance from God in any of that regard, or was it just more like I'm making the decision, and I'm sure you were praying in general, but I mean like,
Yeah, specifically about the alcohol, I don't. I, if I said yes, it wouldn't be because I vividly remember it. I'm sure that I did, in in a non-traditional sense of praying, just like especially in the evenings when after I drinking too much. But your thoughts are so. My thoughts are typically they were typically much deeper and actually more in the spiritual world. Probably not good spiritual stuff, although I didn't have crazy stuff that some people talk about. But I was definitely more open to just kind of having regular conversation with God in those moments. But yeah, there wasn't a hardcore intense prayer specifically about help me stop. It was just I think admitting what I already knew, that this had to be something bigger than me. And that something bigger than me, like, isn't just the universe. Like, it's very specific. It's, the God that created the universe. And and so yeah, I think since then my faith has definitely just been more even more intentional uh in in a private sense, I guess, like just being more intentional about just reading, studying scripture a little bit more from a starting to read the Bible from the beginning to the end type manner right now, just to get a just for discipline's sake, but also just because there's so much that I've just not done. You just kind of take stories and scripture for what someone's telling you, what some man's telling you, right? And there's a lot of interesting stories, especially in the Old Testament. I don't recommend a new Christian starting there, but it's pretty wacky things going on. But it's all, there's reasons behind it all, and I have a desire to read it and learn it all now. Which I even before I drank, I life was just so crazy and difficult, that I would just solely rely on uh the teachings of man, I guess. Not that they were bad, but I definitely wasn't where I am now, So in my from an outward appearance, my spiritual leadership is probably a little bit different than probably would most would say is what I'm supposed to be doing, and that's fine. People can have their opinions. Um, but it's very much a part of our family, and I think more of the vocal part of it comes from my wife, though. Just part of the homeschooling is like if she does a minimum, it's going to be reading the Bible. Like that's like if she only has a few minutes in the day, and that's an area of our parenting that she has taken full reins of. And I assist in advice and decisions here and there, but I'm not the one with the math book or anything like that. That's what she's doing, but at the very minimum, she's covering the Bible and stories, and we're involved in a Christian homeschool group.
those conversations are definitely going across our dinner table at the moment of the way we want to go about schooling, raising, how we want to do it now more than ever. I'm getting the good old classic America vibe from yourself, and it's definitely, I know I'm married to a Japanese woman, but it's definitely over here too, and we're having those conversations. Like I said, nobody goes to sleep and wakes up and thinks, oh, it's more normal, right? It's just a reality at the current moment, in every which direction. But so one thing you had mentioned on your website, and this is kind of a little bit of a right turn or a left turn, but I thought it was powerful, but also polarizing. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts a little bit. 1.5 billion spent annually to keep you away from achieving your success. Dive into that for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's no secret, anyone that wants to open up their eyes, it's everywhere. It's alcohol specifically is what I was referring to there. And I mean, obviously the numbers are pulled from a Google search, but it's very obvious. Like I would think it would actually be more than that, honestly. I mean, it's in everything, and it's so acceptable in our society and normal. Like I've talked about, addiction to a drug is an addiction to a drug. They all have different, results, but alcohol is one of the few that doesn't have. The only stigma about alcohol is talking about not drinking it, right? Uh, It's fully acceptable to talk about even getting drunk over the weekend. But yet, if I was a coke addict, or doing whatever coke addicts do, however they snort it or whatever, I don't know. I don't know that world at all. But like no one's going to be like, oh yeah, I want to try that this weekend too. Like no one's going to be proud of you or think it's fun or whatever. They're going to think like you have a problem, right? And but yet the same principles apply. Like you're still relying on this substance to to walk uh, in yourself. You're trying to find your whatever. That's how you're functioning. And so media, I mean, what happens in every movie, right? Like anytime there's a stressful situation, doesn't matter if it's a TV show, which we don't watch a lot of any things, but the few that I've seen over the years, any TV show, any movie, anytime there's a stressful situation, like anything, it's alcohol is the first thing they go to. Got to have a drink. Got to have a drink, right? And so it's just programmed in our minds that this is what you do. Uh, country music. I mean, like all music, but especially country. I was real big into country music, although I'm not country style. I just liked a lot of that music, especially when I was drinking, especially on the evenings. I mean, my preference is like classic rock or rock, but and it has its own weirdness, but country just kind of camps out there, and it's just like what you do as a man. But yet, all the problems that we're talking about in these songs and these movies, most of them are caused by the thing that you're using to think you're getting away from it. But we don't see that because it's so in our faces all the time to spread this message that it's normal. It's just a part of the human. This is what we do. And then you have other cultures, right? Like I have a lot of people that reach out from, I think Sweden. I think it's a very in their culture, right? I remember going to Germany, and it's like you just drink beer. You drink a lot of it. In Turkey, it was like that too. Like there was a lot of uh, I don't remember the specific. I wasn't drinking at the time, but I just remember seeing a lot of certain types of alcohol or liquor. Probably in Japan, I don't know. Like there's all kinds of cultures, and then the wine culture in Italy. And again, I wouldn't say that all that's bad, especially the wine culture in Italy. Like it's very interesting, and maybe that is done differently over there. I wouldn't have necessarily an opinion on that, but the fact is that I don't know that there's much value that's brought from it. You can still have your family get-togethers. You can still have all your stuff, all the same stuff without this. But yeah, the world is coming at us pretty hardcore. Um, and I remember hearing it as a kid about with cigarettes. This attempt to, I remember there was this billboard that we would drive by. It was Coors Light, and it was this girl laying in not a bikini, but like a one piece, skin tight one piece bathing suit. And it's like, what's this have to do with beer? But it's like this illusion that you can get her if you drink this, or you'll be like that, or whatever. I don't know what it was, but it's always coming at us. So yeah.
And they call it programming
Oh yeah,
for a
it's
reason,
100%,
right?
and so many people won't even acknowledge that it's a programming. Someone just said, I just asked what books people were reading on my stories, and somebody mentioned a book that was similar to a book that I have by Mark Dice that was talking about, Hollywood propaganda and just, I mean, he's talking about other things other than alcohol, but just the programming that comes at us, and most people just kind of take it.
I have to ask, sorry, I'm a book cat. I love books. What What was the book?
I'll have to find it. I can send it to you, but just the reality of knowing that like it's our media isn't um, harmless.
It's funny. I think America developed all of this stuff, right? Thomas Edison invented the moving pictures, as they called it. He controlled it. Hollywood was established because of Edison's control, right? We kind of grew up with it. They called it programming, and I say grow up with it as a technology, not like we played. Believe it or not, I'm only 31, but we played stickball outside, and we were still playing outside. That was a thing when I was growing up, and my family was very deliberate about different media things. So the reality is that America, I think, is really just starting to wake up to the reality that they didn't call it programming on accident, right? And it's very different to watch a movie, but then a constant barrage. And what we have is a constant barrage, like the woman in the bikini. I mean, name a cologne or a perfume commercial that shows anything about the smell of it, right? Dior. Like I don't want to get sued, but I can name all the names. It's like it never even bothers to show, like it just shows the bottle at the end and says the single, there's reasons for that, right? So it's alcohol also is in that unique category where exactly what you said. Cover for me. I'm hungover today. I'm so sorry. Thanks, friend. That's normal. And I'm the bad guy for going, hey, man, no. Like, I'm busy. Like, you didn't even ask. You're just assuming that I'm going to, like, I got to be. So, these are all the little things that I think, if anybody is really catching a lot of this wisdom, these are the little things that I don't think I even realized or noticed until a couple months ago where I got that little tap on the shoulder. And again, I've never had an issue per se. Even in a functional standpoint, but it's like there is those little things. I also started to really notice when I was going to the Chamber of Commerce's as a serial entrepreneur as yourself, and I'm here in Okinawa, and there's a couple people that are always seem to have a certain confidence within them, and there's a couple people in particular that I can think of that everyone in the chamber looks up to, and I just started to watch them a little more. And I started to notice all of these gatherings, the spring gathering, the summer gathering for the chamber, even if it's a cigar day. They're the first to show up. They don't drink. They say hello to every single person very deliberately, and they're the first ones to leave. I won't say his name, but it starts with an H, and he's like always the first one gone. And it was like, there's a reason why he does that. There's a reason why and everyone in the group kind of looks up to them, right? He's doing quite well. These can't be coincidences, right? In terms of when you shield from certain programming, right? And just kind of starting to notice like, oh, I see that now. Like I didn't realize that, right? And the clarity of mind, right? Confidence is a thing that you talk quite a lot about. If you had to choose getting sober or getting into the shape you are in now, there's no right or wrong answer. Which one would you say got you kind of the biggest boost in terms of confidence?
Honestly, I would say at first, and maybe still now, I'd say getting sober because I mean my first thought was that I probably should say fitness because but I mean the reality is I remember feeling not in control or powerful because because it had to be it was God doing it. I mean I had to make the choice. That's the interesting thing about the conversation is that you know it's not by works, but we actually have to do stuff. So it's not we can't just although I've been in camps where you just sit back and pray and let God do his thing, and I haven't seen it work out very well, but there might be a season for that, I suppose, but I don't know. No, I would say definitely that because alcohol had such control over me that although I still kind of had to figure out, it's been a process to kind of find who I was without drinking, especially at this stage of my life. Like I knew who I was before I drank, and I wasn't really too happy with that, I guess, and just maybe in some areas that I just couldn't control, and so it was just frustrating. But there was a lot of things that I was pretty proud of and confident in. But yeah, stopping drinking, sobriety definitely has given me the most, because I don't have to be controlled by it anymore. It doesn't. It consumed every minute of my thoughts, literally, especially the last several years. It wasn't that bad the whole time, but it was that bad for the last 3 or 4 years. And and that's a lot of weight. Because you're trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to drink in this situation? How am I going to get alcohol to the zoo? How am I going to get it to the, I mean, you name it. Like, I found a way to get it everywhere, and now I don't have to do that. I don't have to think about this thing that was controlling me. So that's 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 a big confidence boost. Obviously, getting in shape, and um, I'd already gone through when I first started working out. Like over that first year, I'd experienced the confidence that comes from changing how your body looks. Because I went from 6'1", 149 pounds to 6'1", 185, 190 pounds in a relatively short amount of time. And I was talking about this with someone yesterday that talking about the confidence that comes from getting physically fit, and it's a real thing, and especially in a government environment, because they're really big on rank and authority, and I worked around a lot of high ranking officers and stuff, and then I was also working around like Marine Corps special ops guys, and I worked around NASA, so there was different environments where I was working around some pretty amazing people according to those titles. And yeah, I was being noticed, and it was weird to me. At first, it was like, it was kind of like the name dropping thing. I learned that game pretty quick, and I didn't overuse it, but I could use it to my advantage if I needed something, done, or needed you know, something to happen. But it would happen on its own just by my the difference in my presence. And so, yeah, there is an element of confidence building that comes from that. I mean, people talk about being unhealthy, or being unfit, whether it's overweight or whatever, and they're just fine with where they're at. Now we have a whole society telling us that it's okay to be who you are, and there's a degree of that being true, to the point of like, you don't just live in depression and sulk, but do something about it. Don't just be fine with something that's really not you. But in America, it's like, I mean, just go to any store, right? It's like celebrated. Uh, you know, there's a store in particular in town that they really celebrate this, large women, and part of their celebration is, there's a picture of a larger woman in her stuff or whatever, but they have a picture of her shirt kind of lifted up, and there's a scar on her stomach. And I'm like, a scar is very different than this other stuff. Like it's not the same category. Like, we don't. She has a choice with this other thing, and the society and world is telling her that it's okay to not do anything about. And she's, seemingly looks like she's in her late 20s, early 30s. Like this is going to progressively get worse. So what help are you going to be to anybody in society? Like, your scar is irrelevant. That's a story you can use, you know, to help someone get through if they have a problem with that. That's a small thing, but this weight issue that you have control over, I don't care what your genetics are, I don't care any of that. Maybe it's a longer process or a shorter process for somebody, but you do have say so in this. You do have say so in these things, and it does bring an element of confidence that you don't have to finagle. you know, you don't have to trick yourself into thinking that, you know, I mean, yeah, we're all great just by being here. We all have a greatness. God created all of us, but I think we have a responsibility to take care of it.
What the temple, right? We kind of alluded a little bit to that earlier. The temple, which is just over the top, magically forgotten about by the church, and by the church I mean ecclesia. And this is worldwide, by the way, right? Like, having an international marriage, and being from Nashville, but also going to Ole Miss. So, like, I'm very familiar with the Southeast, right? And like the SEC, like football, right? Like homegrown American horse, and also international with the Japanese wife. You know, we both lived in Europe, and I'm like, I've seen this all over, and it's just this seems to be not an isolated incident, right? In many regards, and we do have control, you know, of it. Eat less, move more. It's probably a good place to start. Nobody starts running marathons immediately, right? But everyone can take a few extra. If you got to walk around your house, walk around your apartment, then you jog around your apartment, then you jog around your house, right? Like whatever. Like there's it's steps, right? And it's like steps of sobriety that it takes a day at a time, right? I couldn't agree more with you in that regard, and I think it's just not. It was temporarily forgotten. Let's put it that way. And I just don't think that it's going to last forever. And I can't, when you're describing that situation, what pops into my head is Chris Pratt's words. When he's like, hey, look, I know everyone tells you that you're perfect. I hate to break it to you. You're not. But that's the beauty of grace. Like, that's the point of this thing, is the growth, is the improvement, right? You know, so that's for whatever reason, that's the quote that just popped into my head there as you're doing it. So tell me about Fit Over 40.
Yeah, so I started the Fit Over 40 Dad page in January, I think, of this year. Um, I had a personal page, and I didn't feel like that was. I just feel like I needed something separate, something very specific to what I was doing now, and that was just being intentional about getting my body back in shape, being intentional about, although I didn't talk about it for several months, being intentional about, not drinking, and being intentional about like new habits I was doing. I was reading Atomic Habits at the time, which was very, very big part of the transformation. Uh, Fit Over 40 Dad, I started that. It was kind of an accountability place for me, just something that, I mean, accountability is interesting. And whenever we commit to something, there's nothing about that thing in and of itself that is making us do anything, whether it's a program, a book, another person. Like we have to choose to stay committed to it, right? No one can make us do that. But I was using this page, it became this thing that I felt responsible to do, even though I started from zero, started, from complete scratch. And I didn't quite know exactly what I wanted to do with it other than just kind of document what I was doing. It's kind of like my diary, so to speak, I guess, scrapbook, whatever. And I remember having a conversation maybe a month or so into it with one of my sons who was. I've got one son that's pretty heavy into social media in the TikTok world of all things. Not anymore, but he was, and and pretty big Instagram following. Although there wasn't really a lot of direction with it, it was just entertainment type stuff. And so we had some preconceived ideas of the rules of Instagram, and you camp out on this algorithm stuff, and you camp out on all this, right? And we also had a couple business pages that, well, at the time just one business page, and so I had some experience with running that quite a bit. So I was using this Fit Over 40 Dad for a couple reasons. I was using it to keep me accountable, just committing to it and just doing something that required me to actually do at least 7 seconds of a move every day, which I obviously did more. Um, but I was using that as a place also to practice things I was learning in the social media world, just as far as how the processes work. And so I started that page. I also started an ICEDAD 11 page for my cold therapy. We, over the course of a couple months, started a couple other pages for our business. So I had 4 or 5 pages that I was running at one time and posting at least 2 reels a day, and it just put me, fully engulfed in this thing. And one of my sons was like, with the Fit Over 40 Dad, it looks like you're trying to do your own style, and you need to just do what's popular. And I'm like, but I can't. Like, this, if it's not popular, then if my style isn't popular, then so be it. Like, it's not for it. There was no intention of it ever doing anything. I had to be authentic. I had to be me. And I don't consume a lot of social media stuff. There was some fitness things over the past that I'd known a few other people, and I'd watched some things that would kind of maybe spark a desire to try some crazy thing or whatever. I always kind of had that, but I never really consumed social media. So my mind wasn't like, cluttered up with all these different ways to do it. So anyway, we hired a business coach for an idea that we had. We put together a training course online for our one of our businesses, and I needed to really hone the skill to get exposure. And so I just started doing other things, consistency, volume. Um, that page started doing well. The other page for our business, Fit Over 40, was just kind of sitting at 50 followers, and this was probably 3 or 4 months into it, and I was like, I think it's kind of run its course. And so I kind of just let it go for a couple weeks, and a buddy of mine that I grew up with uh, sent me this hat, sent me this Fit Over 40 hat that he made with this little leather patch on this black camo hat. He sent me two of them. And I opened up the box. I had no idea he was sending it. I opened up the box and I was like, wow. So I reached out and said thanks. And he gave me his testimony of like how uh, it was affecting him. And I was like, it was my first real experience of because I wasn't getting any interaction. I mean, you might get 20 views on a reel and zero comments and three likes. And so I didn't really see the point of doing the social media anymore. But it was affecting him. He came across it because we were friends on my other page, and so he followed it. And it really reignited, or I don't know that it reignited, but it just gave me a real vision of what this could be. Of even as small as it was, even if it was just impacting one person, then great. And so I just rolled with it. And at the time, there was this. Uh, I was aware of some trending things for my kids, and so one of the trending things was these introductory type posts, like "This is me, who I am," and I tried to do it the traditional style where you're just standing in front of a wall, and it looks so stupid. I had the video for a long time, but I didn't post it. I'm like, this is dumb. So scrapped that idea, and then I went running. Which after my marathon, I had an injury that I'm still kind of dealing with, and so I was trying to see if I could run again. And we went running for like maybe a mile, just me and one of my boys. And he's always this is the son that's in social media, so he took a video of me and he sent it to me afterwards, and I was like, oh, this might be a good, it's just me running, nothing crazy. We're actually on our driveway, and uh, and so I just used that as a place to put this introduction thing, and then that's the post that just went berserk. It's got 2.5 million views. I've gotten 20,000 followers from that one post, and it just kind of blew up. And then I started getting interaction because when people come to your profile and follow you, then they start going through your content, and if they like it, they consume it. And if they don't, they just move on, and they may unfollow you later. But something about what I was doing was resonating with a lot of men and women. And so I started seeing the value in the consistency. And of course, posting daily. I post 4 or 5 reels every day now on this page, on the Fit Over 40 Dad, and then I post one or two on some other pages. But it really is impacting somebody, and a lot of men reach out. I don't have a lot of clients, I never thought I would do any kind of coaching per se. I just like I, I don't like the mental part of what has to happen because that's something that only you can do individually. Like I can say things and compliment you or check you on this or that, but you really have to make that decision. But I like helping and giving. That was part of one of our businesses never really did very well because we just like to give it. So we're learned we know better now. Like there's value to what we have, and so there's a value exchange. I get it, but I'm pretty quick to just give things. And so the things that I had learned as a dad, this was an outlet to give that. And uh, the lessons that I've learned in my faith, in my marriage, in living in 20 different states, uh, traveling to different countries, my job, the structure of my job, the structure of my walk, just in general. There's value to it that helps people in those places that they're at of struggle. So.
For what it's worth, um, going into the kind of the rabbit hole and the cross linking of the different places that you can be found in different accounts and whatnot. Like I said, I don't pretty much hardly ever use social. Like, I've been in the back end with enough corporations and on the branding and marketing, and same thing for the government side of things, to know like, I'm not using this all that much for consumption necessarily. So even if you like look on my profile, there's like tons of posts and then years, literally years, and then more, and then it's like waves. And then it wasn't until fairly recently that I just was like, you know what, I'm doing this. But it's pretty much clips from the show, but diving into the cross linking of what you were doing, something about that, it's funny that you say that you just wanted to give. I literally, before hopping on here, was talking to my wife, again, for what it's worth, and I just said, I think I'm just going to turn that into the shows page and create a separate one and just start doing that, like sharing the experiences of international, right? And having an international marriage. And, if communication is already a struggle for marriages, just throw a language barrier. By the way, English isn't her second language, it's her third language, right? Just throw that in there so you can imagine. So it's like, and like you really, for lack of better terms, because it's cliche, but really inspired me to go, I think I need to just start sharing some of the experiences and the lessons that I've had in less of just a clip it and post it kind of way. And where that ends up going, I'm not sure, but I literally 10 minutes before hopping on here was like, there's something about the way he's doing this. There's a realness, right? There's a raw, I guess is a better word, because I think, authenticity is a buzzword now and it's overused, but there's a raw to the way you're doing it, and the way you really are clearly, look, you get haters on all sides. No matter what you do, if you get attention, right? We're praising the wrong things and we're tearing down the right things in this current culture worldwide. But you can see it in your posts that there are people that are affected. There are people that are sincerely, taking what you're doing and going, there's real, like there's benefit here. There's value here. There's lessons here, and you're giving me hope, So I just wanted to again, take it for what it's worth. I just wanted to share that with you that, I think you really are making a bigger impact. Was it out of the blue? So I did see that one where you're like, whoa, woke up 200,000 followers. Was it completely out of the blue? And how long was that after you decided, like, I got this hat, it touched my heart, and I want to keep doing this, and I think I need to? I mean, was it like months later that you started to see this pickup, or was it kind of
I think
shortly?
yeah, I don't remember the exact timeline, but I want to say it was probably at least a month. I think I remember being stuck at 53 followers for the longest time. And I was like, this is so dumb, like why am I continue to do this? And I got the hats. And then I just,
It's dumb, especially when you're not focused on the numbers.
yeah,
Because you're like, I don't even care about the followers, but this is still
yeah, it's
like irking me a
yeah,
little bit. Like, yeah.
you really start wondering, like, there's bitterness that sets, like, you wrestle with all these little things. It's like, especially, so I'd come across a page, a guy in California who, I don't know if he's blocked me since or whatever. I can't find his page anymore, but I watched him. I came across his page when he had 60,000 followers. Similar story. He's in his early 50s. Uh, just a very, like, kind of awkward guy, just very real. I could really relate to his style. And his pretty much just was just kettlebell workouts and things like that in his California backyard. And but sobriety, and he'd kind of found God, or whatever, and that was kind of his story. And he was talking about it quite a bit. And I watched over like a month period him grow from 50, 60,000 followers. uh, I came across a post that he was referring to one of his viral posts. So I went and looked at that. And at the time, it didn't, like all the ones before that there wasn't a lot of viewage. So I could tell that his account was fairly new. But I was like, wow, this is actually doing something. This is like a case in point to what could potentially happen if I wanted to, get exposure or whatever. So I kept watching his stuff. Wasn't really doing anything like what he does. He's got a much different style, but it was it kind of gave me a little bit of hope in the social media world that with consistency and just being authentic and real, that you could do something. And I was really more applying that to our we have an online training course for puppies, and I was really more applying it to that page because we were trying to get this course going and started the new page, and I just really wanted to get out of this mindset that the algorithm was holding me back, or that we were being shadow banned. Because on our main business page, we had like 15,000 followers, but I wasn't really getting any interaction. So you start thinking it's the system. It's not that you're just putting out crappy content, right? And um, and so I I got hope that with consistency and being authentic, being real, that I could do something with this and with our other page. And uh and then I watched him quickly grow up to over 200,000 people, and then I watched mine grow from like 53 to 200. And I think that's when I did that post, that run of me running and just introducing myself, and that one very quickly. uh I'd had a few that had done maybe a couple thousand views, and that was like big, at the time. And yeah, so it was kind of an all at once type thing, over. I think that post was done in April. I don't remember what part of April, but at some point in April, I think, is whenever I did that running introductory post. And my style was still a little different. I look back at some of those reels, and it's just they're kind of some are kind of funny looking, but I was just really trying to figure out who I was, and I didn't have access to certain tools on Instagram. That's for sure. I mean, that kind of that changes all four accounts that I have access to right now. Every single one of them have different tools. Like, it's the most frustrating thing. Different filters, different fonts, different music, different whatever. And so those are things you have to get used to, but it really comes down to what I've found is that I think people are kind of tired of the overproduced uh, stuff. That's why, the idea of a reality show was so popular to people, although those ended up being scripted and produced. Uh, the idea of it was really what people they wanted to see. They don't want to just camp out in your struggles, but they want to see that you're real and that you deal with stuff too. So, even occasionally, like, when I'm learning something new, I'll post parts of that, the awkward, the lack of coordination that I have, which is very high. I have very little coordination sometimes, but it's a process that you don't see a lot of that, and if I can find a lesson, or if it reminds me of a lesson, or something, then I roll with it. But so many of the things that I posted that I that were like reluctant type posts, like I couldn't really see. It was almost like I was just filling a space. This isn't 100%, but sometimes it felt like that. Those are the ones that like really hit hard, and they just do. It's really bizarre. I wouldn't say that's a pattern, or I wouldn't put that in a book as step one, two, three, but it seems to be the case for me, and I've heard this from many people.
Rapid fire here. Just, you know, whatever you got. Three books that you recommend everybody should read.
Atomic Habits, um, Start by John Acuff, and Be Obsessed or Be Average.
What is the workout that you hate doing that you do it anyway?
Anything legs.
Not a leg guy,
No,
huh?
not at all, and it shows.
And you do quite a lot of ice baths, right? What's the settings that you do?
44 degrees is what I keep my tub at. I don't have circulating water. It's just um, the chest freezer setup. But 44 degrees, about 2.5 minutes. I don't use a watch anymore. I just noticed if I ever video it, that's how long I stay in it is 2.5 minutes. And typically around 5:30 in the morning.
That was the next one. Is what time's the alarm?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't,
So
I just kind of wake up naturally. I typically wake up, my body will wake up around 4:30, 4:45, and I try to go back to lay there a little bit longer. Sometimes I'll get up just depending on the excitement of the day. And I'll usually wake back up at 5:30, somewhere around in there. So.
One piece of advice that you're giving your 18-year-old self.
Wow. I think that, well, I can tell you the conversations I've had with my current, well, he's 19 now, but in my 16-year-old, 17-year-old, is that now's the time in life to make those sacrifices that we think are so big, right? The sacrifices just get bigger as you get more responsibility. And so at this stage in your life when you really don't have a lot of responsibility, this is the time to apprentice for somebody and learn. This is the time to not worry about how much money you're making. This is the time, this is the time whenever to take more risk. I mean, worst case scenario, you end up on someone's couch. It's hard to do that when you have 11 kids.
What's your favorite food?
Anything Mexican. This could be. We never intend this to sound racist because it's not at all. But there was a statistic once that said like one in and now it's a much. This was years ago. Whenever we heard this, that like 1 in 10 kids was Mexican or something like that in the United States. And I understand where that is going now. And but we used to joke that we were trying for, because that was our favorite food, and we were trying for. But anyway, we never intended it to sound wrong. But I think it. I don't say it as much anymore because it sounds bad. But yeah, Mexican's our favorite food. We eat that a lot. That's our favorite restaurant style. That's where we go on our date nights. So yeah.
You're connecting with somebody, at the grocery store, and you've only got a couple minutes. You got to go. You got to get your kids anyways, but you just feel like you got to speak something into that person. I'm sure this is very context based, but if you could share something that would just touch their heart, what would that be?
I think just uh, not settling. Like don't settle. Like so many. Part of this programming from media, from everything around us, is that we just go through life and very safe, and we don't take risk. That we just kind of like find our true job that pays us well, that has the good retirement, a good medical plan, and we rely on experts to kind of get us to 64 and a half, and then we can just kind of retire. And maybe someone is passionate about doing it that way. Hard for me to believe truly, but um you know not settling and reaching for whatever your full potential is. uh you're going to be surprised at what you're able to actually do, and it's going to look different. I can't say it enough that it's not about this one's better than that one, lifestyle wise, but so many people don't reach their potentials, and the problems with that is that so much opportunity is left on the table, so much help is left on the table, so much change. uh you know I'm not a big world peace type talker, but there's an element of that you know what it would take to the way that people would have to operate for that environment would require people to not settle and kind of get out of their comfort zones. And so, I mean, that's not too profound and deep, but I think it's just the reality of that. Just so many people settle, and so just don't settle in life. Like there's so much more, and yeah, it's life's pretty great, especially when you pursue it.
Well, thank you so much for your time, JD, for everything, and keep putting it out there. I promise it's definitely making a difference. And I don't know how much you dive into, because you've got a lot going on, but it's very apparent. And as a dad with 11 kids, I don't say that as a pun. So thank you for the time.